Hey everyone, it's Alex and welcome to the Marvel Snap Decks of the Week, the weekly series where we showcase the top 10 best decks in Marvel Snap. Now right off the top, you're going to notice that we're not using win rate or cube rate based statistics this week, and you might be thinking, Alex, that's weird. Why is that? Well, let's take a second to discuss Marvel Snap, games played, statistical kind of integrity, but most importantly, trying to provide you guys with the most accurate depiction of the meta as possible. Now, naturally, when we do these videos, we use untapped based statistics. We like to have high statistical confidence in the decks we're selecting. Decks with 1,000 games is preferred. Anything above is just giving you additional statistical integrity. Anything below starts to get weaker. If you're in the 200 game played range, that's not great. You're going to want to see more games than that. The larger the sample size, the more accurate the depiction. So what's the challenge around OTAs then? Well, let's just be honest. There's less games of Marvel Snap being played on a frequent basis in terms of what is being tracked statistically via Untapped, which is a whole argument on itself that, Untapped does not represent the entire player base, as the entire player base is not utilizing Untapped to provide it with its data. Generally speaking, the most competitive players are using Untapped, casual players aren't, so there's a whole bunch of discussion around that. However, what's important is that with OTAs, we have a major shakeup in the meta. The game's fundamentally not played the same way. We have a very different meta, and the cards that are usually targeted in OTAs are usually meant to be impactful, either on the high end or the low end. Cards that need buffs get buffs, and cards that are overpowered get nerfed, and that's kind of really important. And so we're in a situation this week where, for instance, a Lockjaw got buffed, but statistically, Lockjaw's underperforming. There's no current leader of the pack deck that honestly I could recommend you to play in terms of ranking up competitively. There's some brews happening, and statistically they're pretty weak, so can't do that. We also have a situation where Airsham is still dominating, and that's a large statistical portion of the pie. So what we have to do instead of relying fully on individual statistics, we need to use intuition. We need to talk about decks that we know are performing. We need to talk about decks that have statistical backing. However, even if they're not getting readily played into the hundreds of games in the given week, games and decks that we know can fundamentally win games, can fundamentally rank up. And so on these types of weeks where the statistics are somewhat weaker than one would expect, what we're going to do is we're going to use our intuition to design a list of 10 decks that we know can provide you the opportunity to rank up. And as we get greater statistical data, we're able on future weeks to then bring back the statistics of win rate and cube rate, because honestly, I could put them on the screen right now. However, they're truly not representative of the power level of these decks because we simply do not have enough statistics. Hopefully, this is remedied by the new movie coming out and all the new features happening with Marvel Snap for the next couple of weeks. We need a new influx of players. We need more data. We need more people playing Marvel Snap. And so, as a result, on occasion, you may find that we're not going to be using the statistics because the statistics are meaningless without the intuition of myself and others who are creating these types of lists in order to ensure that you're getting the best kind of decks possible. Because unfortunately, without a full set of data, the data can be misleading. Okay, so with that being said, let's get started with our decks of the week. Deck number 10, Ajax. Now this is kind of like a middle of the pack performing deck. I wouldn't be fixating on this one to rank up. It is, however, the best performing Ajax deck, and the ones you're going to want to turn to for your tokens for the weekend missions. Now, weekend missions is kind of funny. I used to do bonus decks specifically for the weekend missions, but let's be honest, you can just throw Ajax into the top performing Airsham deck I'll talk about later, and it'll probably just be fine. Airsham's going to be the absolute god tier card of finishing weekend missions for a long time, because you just put all the cards in there and you'll probably just win with Airsham anyway. But anyways, this is currently the top Ajax deck. You do have some good synergy with him, including Hazmat, White Widow. Now, note that if they actually kind of fill the Widow's bite location, that will fall off of Ajax itself. But the major winning line is you have a big Ajax, you also have a big Mockingbird, while also generating some key synergy with your Athena, your Angela, and your Kitty Pryde combination. Angela, Kitty Pryde, and Athena are everywhere this week. They are so damn good, especially when the meta shifts up a lot. You end up kind of turning back to these tried, tested, and true packages that just overperform. And so we're going to be seeing a lot of these three cards, and that's Ajax top deck of the week. Now, we had Lockjaw get buffed, so people started playing some more Lockjaw. People started playing some more Jane Foster, and it's funny because the Lockjaw decks are somewhat underperforming, but Jane Foster actually has an up-and-coming negative deck that seems to be doing pretty well. The win rate's on the lower side, however, the cube rate is exceptional. So this is really interesting for a number of reasons. What's notable here is this is a bit of a meta call because you do have Darkhawk, which is pretty good when he's inverted, right? But you don't have any true Darkhawk activators. This is very much a read of like the 30-something%, the 40, almost 40% that Airsham still represents in the meta. Although falling, Airsham is still a major core component of the meta, which is allowing these greedy Jane Foster style decks to take advantage of that. So ultimately, this deck has a very solid cube rate. The reason why the win rate would be lower would be because if you're not matched against Airsham and you don't have a good draw, or you don't get that that Mr. Negative on curve, then suddenly the deck feels like it kind of falls apart. Very notable that Ravonna Renslayer has been nerfed, but still providing a lot of value to this particular list. That's number 9, J Negative. This has to be the most underrated deck in Marvel Snap right now. Nomura on reveal continues to be remarkably solid. The cube rate is phenomenal. The win rate is phenomenal. The deck has just performed over the last month. Like, since Nomura's release, honestly, this list has crushed. But it has a very low kind of play rate. It has a very low meta percentage because people just, I guess, didn't buy Nomura, which is okay. But I'm telling you, this deck absolutely slaps. So if you happen to have Nomura and you want to climb, this is one of the best climbers of the week. One of the best climbers in the meta right now. It's just not seeing a lot of play. Also, it's worth noting that we're building tech Airsham based decks, but we're not putting Cosmo in those decks, right? You have every other kind of tech piece in these Airsham decks, but not Cosmo, so you often get your combos off. Be aware though, we are seeing rogues, we're seeing enchantresses, and while those will minimize the ceiling on a deck like this, they won't crush the deck as a whole, because you can still just play White Tiger Odin and put up a lot of value without the Wong. Wong is a nice little gravy on top, so to speak, but ultimately the deck still performs with the current counters that are being played within Airsham, including Enchantress and Rogue. So Nomura on reveal is honestly an absolute banger, and while it has a number 8 beside it, it could very well be one of the absolute top decks of this week. Now we go to number 7, and Silver Surfer continues to be overperforming expectations. Now this is interesting. It's performing better now statistically because what we're seeing is the reduction in the verticality of Blob and Mystique's combination. We are seeing Absorbing Man being played instead of the Mystique, so you are still seeing massive Blob's very vertical power, but this deck really does a good job of going wide and effectively going wide, while also having the verticality with Sebastian Shaw. There's a lot to love about this deck. Hope Summers also is great because it allows you to play into it and allows you to sneak that Absorbing Man on turn 6 if you have to. It gives you that additional optionality. It's worth noting that this version does not run Sarah. Now, I'd always run Sarah in my Surfer decks, but statistically, this one is actually overperforming the Sarah version. It also has Gwenpool, which obviously works well with Sebastian Shaw and Brood, because you need that vertical power in order to compete with a lot of these vertical threats in the current meta. Big sticks of power, and Gwenpool can activate that. So a very interesting deck. I am personally more comfortable with the Sarah Surfer versions. However, this one statistically is the top Surfer deck in the meta at the moment. We go to number 6, straight up Darkhawk. Now I like this. I talked about this a couple weeks ago, where I felt that the really greedy Darkhawk versions were only kind of applicable during Airsham's like 70% meta reign. And eventually you'd have to put Darkhawk activators in the deck, or else you're just going to feel terrible in every other matchup. And that's exactly what's happened here. Now the top performing Darkhawk deck actually features Korg, Rockslide, and others in order to actually activate the value of the Darkhawk itself. It's also notable that this will counter the kind of the gamers trying to play Lockjaw, despite Lockjaw not overly performing at the moment. But I do think a lot of people are brewing Lockjaw Thanos, okay? So stay tuned for next week. But ultimately, this is a good deck. You have good cards. Ravonna got nerfed, but still, you got Sage, you got Mystique, you got Iron Man, you got lots of options here. And once again, that package of Kitty Pryde, Angela, and Thena are just great performers. So Darkhawk, if you want to play Darkhawk, and this does a great job of countering the Airsham-based decks, this is the one you can go with. Now, my personal preference is to include a Shang-Chi in a deck like this. However, This is currently the meta version, but if you can sneak a Shang-Chi in there, like if you're missing a card, like if you don't have Nocturne, for instance, while Nocturne is fantastic, Shangers would be a good mix. Kind of good thing to add there. This deck is really good, statistically performing very strong, and this is the inclusion of Viper. This is cool. Viper got a major change, and what we're seeing here is the opportunity to actually kick things over. Kick over a Mysterio clone that's not going to give additional power, and you could even do that after you play Mockingbird. So you discount Mockingbird, you kick over the clone, and it's just a waste of space. You could also Cersei the clone. You have a Nihilist, so you could do some interesting things there with Sentry. You can then guarantee that you're going to kick over the Sentry's Void. Viper doing work in these decks. It's worth noting we're seeing much more aggressive builds of Viper being tested and experimented with, ones that utilize debris in order to kind of really jam up locations really fast. But right now, statistically, this is the top Viper deck, but I would expect a Viper brew to be coming out next week that could potentially shake things up more significantly. I think Viper's buff is very, very significant, and it's only a matter of time before a brood really kind of shapes that'll take Viper to the next level, because honestly, it's huge for junk. Yes, it provides you with a counter to White Widow, who's one of the most popular and probably the best 2-drop in the game right now. But realistically, I think Viper as an offensive weapon cannot be understated. So I think we're going to see some junk over the next couple of weeks. Now, Silky Athena, this is pretty damn cool. And I think what's kind of spurred the idea around this deck was that buff to Miles Morales. That's a 4/6. You got a whole bunch of stuff moving in this deck, right? And it's notable that with Angela, Nocturne, Silk, Jeff, you are generating a lot of value for Angela while not overcommitting in a specific location. We're also having Kitty Pryde and Athena to actually carry the load as well. Gwenpool's great here. You also have the tech of Mobius and Shang-Chi. Very well balanced deck. And ultimately, because you have a top end of Vision, you're able to very effectively at almost all stages of the game play 2 cards, which is very useful for Athena's power potential. She's the vertical threat here, while you do have a ton of extra mobility elsewhere. Kraven also provides a lot of value here, but Kraven can be a little tricky sometimes, and we even saw some silky smooth style decks cutting Kraven, which is kind of crazy in its own right. But that extra power level to Spider-Man Miles Morales and the extra power being generated by Gwenpool is apparently putting this deck amongst the top in the game. That takes us to number 3. We have Kitty Gwenpool. So once again, a little bit of a different flair to what we just spoke about. This one's using the Sasquatch Mockingbird combination. Very similar shell. We do have the Kitty Pryde Athena Angela combination. Once again, Jeff and Mobius. Very similar shell, but the top end is now very different. Before, the top end was something like a Vision, focused on the mobility with the Kraven. Now we just have the let's get stuff out there, slam Mockingbird, slam Sasquatch, okay? Big power sticks. Now, it's also notable that both Mockingbird and Sasquatch are susceptible to Shang-Chi. However, both can come out before turn 6. They can also be played on turn 6. So very interesting kind of use of cards here. The play pattern of this deck, especially when you consider that Hope Summers can allow you to cheat that extra mana, makes the nerf to Mockingbird a little less impactful because, again, that Hope Summers helps to compensate for the additional cost. Overall, an absolutely remarkably high-performing deck right now. It is seeing more and more play. However, from a statistical perspective, I know I'm not showing it, but I'll tell you, the statistics are very high on this particular deck. It's like almost 60% win rate. So anyways, it's a good one. We go to number 2. We got 2 versions of Arishem. It's 2 versions of Arishem. This is the first version of Arishem. It's a Quinjet version. And Quinjet is pretty damn good. Like, okay, so it's funny. We have a version of Arishem that's overperforming a Quinjet version, but the popularity of the Quinjet version is very, very high. It looks as though people tend to prefer playing the Quinjet version. And what I will say is that, like, the thing about this deck that I think goes understated is the turn 4 Dr. Octopus. This card right here is destroying souls. Destroying souls. To the point we're starting to see even brews where you can turn 4 Dr. Octopus, and then you might even be able to, like, turn 5 Galactus somewhere else. We're starting to see some Arishem Galactus brewing. It's not quite ready for prime time yet, maybe next week, but we're seeing Dr. Octopus being an absolute remarkable Arishem card, okay? And so, statistically, these decks are performing very, very well. And Arishem really does well with Dr. Octopus because turn 4 Doc Ock can be absolutely detrimental to your opponent. We're also running Leech here, the Goliath, and of course we have the Blob as well. if you need to blow up your hand, you do have Loki. And before we get to the number 1 deck of the week, if you're not subscribed yet, consider hitting that subscribe button. Over half of the people that watch this video are not subscribed, probably because like you just didn't think of it, right? And so if you haven't subscribed yet, consider hitting that button. It would mean a lot to me, just so I can keep up with you and hopefully deliver good, helpful, useful content for as long as you're playing Marvel Snap. So thank you so much for your consideration. Let's talk about deck number 1. And if you're looking for the best Airsham version, this is it. Some people are preferring the other one because the Doc Ock is so damn disruptive. This one has the Legion, right? Legion's pretty damn good. This has the Rogue for that matchup against the the Dark Hawks, where the other one was running a Enchantress. Very similar decks. Similar statistics. This one's overperforming slightly. It does not include Quinjet, it has Echo instead. However, what I will say is that the decks, both Airsham, are performing exceptionally well. Airsham is clear-cut one of the absolute best decks in the game right now, and if you find yourself wondering if you should get Airsham, well, you probably should. I wonder if he gets nerfed. He seems so uniquely interesting, and he has such natural counterplay with Darkhawk that it's like, he doesn't feel like he's as oppressive as some of the releases we had with like Loki. That was really oppressive for a long time. If you remember the old days of Shuri Red Skull, like that was brutal for a really long time. I don't think Arisham's there. Arisham's really good, but I don't think it's ruining the game good. You know what I mean? And so currently, still the best. If you want to play Marvel Snap and you want to rank up, this is one of the absolute decks that you can turn to do so. If you don't have the Namora one anyway. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I truly appreciate you, and we'll see you on that next Marvel Snap video.